Hey, welcome to Todd Mountain, British Columbia. Out for a little outing with my friend Matt down there in his lovely little Land Rover. So welcome to Travels with Geordie. If this is your first visit, we're not often on top of mountains, but my name is Peter and I live on a wooden motor cruiser in Victoria, British Columbia, which I'm restoring. And if that's the sort of thing you're interested in, why don't you stick around and subscribe? This week's video is going to be continuing on with the electrical work on my friend's boat, MV Zephyrus, and we'll get some of the AC circuits in. So, hey, let's get to it. Oh, by the way, don't forget, I give away a free Travels with Geordie t-shirt with every episode. If you'd like to find out how I do that, have a look down in the description. Cheers! And we're back again on MV Zephyrus, carrying on with electrical. Today we're going to do AC circuits. You can see a bag full of electrical boxes over there, and it's going to be pretty straightforward. There's a lot of AC circuits on the, no, not a lot of circuits. There's going to be a lot of plugs, doubling up on the circuits, so roughly 2 plugs per circuit. The main panel will be there with the DC panel. So basically I'm going to have a plug both sides, just underneath the deck here in the wheelhouse, and then obviously 2 plugs in the galley, one in that corner, one in that corner. Obviously a plug in the head. There's already a hole for it right there. We'll need a plug behind the fridge, and we're going to put a plug in the cockpit for anything we might ever need to put outside. And then leaving one complete circuit for the forecastle. For now it'll be a plug, but someday the forecastle may become an office. It's a much smaller forecastle than my boat has, so it would be a pretty snug little office, but we'll leave a whole circuit for it. Anyway, so I'm going to get started now cutting up some more beautiful sapella mahogany to make little panels to go underneath the deck to take the plugs, as well as little DC plugs, which in the old days were considered cigarette lighters. It's strange what really happened in the world of plugging in DC things. It started with cars in the 50s and 60s. I don't know what the first thing anyone ever really plugged into a car was. I actually had a small plug-in coffee maker once that would sort of warm water. But I plugged into the cigarette lighter because that was a quick and easy access that manufacturers realized they could get access to 12 volts in a car. It's the worst possible plug. It's very inefficient. It doesn't actually have a detent. In other words, it doesn't click. But somehow it became a standard for power points in cars. In fact, if you buy a new car, it doesn't have a cigarette lighter, or if it does, it has one. And it has a whole bunch more of cigarette lighter style plugs to plug everything else in the sun in. But that's sort of being superseded by USB, Universal Serial Bus. Is that what it stands for? It's one of those acronyms that no one really knows what it stands for. But you know what it is. It's the little, I don't have anything handy. Your phone plugs into it. You got a bunch on the side of your computer. And it's become sort of a standard for 5 volt, 5.5 volt. Small DC voltages for almost everything we need. Little fans, little glowy mice, obviously all our iDevices and those alien devices, I think Android or whatever it is. So the boat will be full of those because this boat certainly has several iDevices. And that goes in the same sort of round hole that a cigarette lighter used to go in, and you see 2 little USB plugs in it. Anyway, I'll show you all that. So in the meantime, got to make some panels to hold all that stuff. Let's get on with it. And now 4.5. Super dangerous taking off little slices like that. I gotta find some safety goggles. Ah! Perfectly clear. So now to make the little side braces, they'll just be 3x3 blocks with some curves on them after. Roughly 3x3 blocks. I want to say something about losing lots of little edges and blocks and bits down into the saw. They end up in the basically the tube where basically the sawdust is supposed to fly out. And not only will they clog it if you leave them down there, worse yet, they'll build up and they'll sit in the bottom. When you lower the blade, if for some reason you do it while it's spinning, it'll kick them out and get someone in the belly, Worse yet, if you do it when it's not running, you'll drive the blade down onto the chunks of wood. The next time you try to start it, it'll stall, something bad will happen. So try to always keep chunks out of that little chute of sawdustness. Alright, let's get working. Okay, so here's all our panels and all our little side blocks that are going to basically hold them on the side. Every one of these, I want to put a little curve in the bottom edge, you know, make it kind of nautical. And these will actually also get a little curve right here as well. Now, cutting a zillion little curves like that with a jigsaw will drive me bonkers, especially because the blade is going to lean right over a bunch of cleanup. So I'm just going to hack it off pretty quick in the table saw and then tidy it up with a sander. Now, if every one of these curves isn't identical, when they're down there, varnished, looking super sweet, they'll be fine. This is not, this is nice carpentry, but it's not cabinetry necessarily. So I don't want you to think I'm taking a hack approach here. But sometimes it's just worth doing it to the point that's reasonable, not kind of over the top. Anyway, to make this curve, I'm using this handy dandy gauge that I just picked up off the console there. So I'm just going to cut these, well, first mark them all off by just setting that in the corner, running the pencil around, get a rough idea of where I'm going to cut to, and then throw them in the saw. Again, this will be relatively dull. I'll probably show you one. Here we go. All the blocks have their radiuses marked on them. So now it's just a matter of cutting the corner a little bit to get it close, and then I'll sand it the rest of the way. And to do that sanding, I have a secret weapon which I will show you in a bit. Now, I don't want to suggest for a moment that this is entirely safe saw work. I've done this kind of stuff a lot and I'm super careful, but it is very true that this is probably not in the manual for using a saw to cut a small scribe like this. You obviously can't make it in a single cut, because as you make the cut, the wood will drive into the back of the blade and you won't go any further. So basically you're going to be shaving it. Basically you take that first one, 45 right off the corner, and a couple more after that, and it should go relatively well. The other thing you want to do is have the blade as high out as possible so that the leading edge of the blade is almost vertical. Well, you'll never get vertical because the shaft can't come up out of the table. But anyway, you can see there, I can get this remarkably close in a little bit of sanding. Bring it a little bit closer. That way also, you'll get the absolute first view of all the blood and guts and gore when I cut my finger off. That's a joke. Okay, this is obviously, definitely goggle work. Let's try some of these. I'm going to try on the big ones first, and see how that goes. Having a whack of little chunks of wood lie around the leading edge of the blade here, it's not really safe. So once they start to get a little cluster there of flying bullets of mahogany, you definitely want to take a few away. Done, and all fingers still attached. Okay. Okay, so to smooth off all these rough corners, I mean, I got it pretty close, but that's not quite going to do. This is one of the most underappreciated shop tools, a stationary belt sander with disc. This one's a bit of a beast. When you have shop tools on your boat, you really want small, light ones, and this is kind of a big, heavy one, but it's going to make light work of this. Show you how that's going to go. So basically there's two belts, two sanding devices. One is a belt that spins, it's just a flat surface, and the other is a disc. The advantage of the disc is that it has a fence or a table, so I can sit and very accurately, relatively accurately, tidy up the edge of this radius, very square with the wood. If I try to do this on here freehand, I might lean over one way or the other and get a little scoop out of there I don't want. Now, to be fair, this disc has almost had it. I have no more. So I'm going to do the roughest part of the work on the belt, get it fairly close, and then finish it up over here. This little fence here is neat. It's to stop your work so that you can just sort of hold it against it and whatever. It happens to be on here. I would recommend you do not use these at ever, because if you get your finger caught under there, and it's not impossible, by the time you get this thing turned off, if you have the wherewithal to even do it, you're going to have removed so much skin, knuckle, bone, flesh, it just, don't use that. Or don't go anywhere near it. I'm going to take it off now. I'm never going to claim to be a particularly safety conscious person, but that just terrifies me. Okay, let's get to this. I'm going to use the same belt to put a bit of a chamfer on the edge. That chamfer will eventually be sanded by hand over into an eased edge. A little more than sometimes I do. Just a little more from here. I'm not quite sure why, but just enough. So what I need to do now is just put enough of a chamfer on that's equal all the way around that I can then sand that into something relatively smooth. Just a relatively quick way to do this. Let's see how that goes. I'll also do the little brackets as well. I have to be a little more careful with these because these are brackets, so there's a left and a right. So I have to put the chamfer on the left and the right. Not that it would matter if it was on both sides. It really wouldn't matter at all. Got all my bits made. Let's go through the process of putting one of these together with the Craig tool. Again, these basically go here and here, and so I'm going to put 2 screws in that way and 2 screws in that way, which will eventually hold it up underneath, as I've said before. Let me show you how it works, and it'll become pretty straightforward. So when I do this stuff, I don't like to measure anything. So basically, I knew that this thing was roughly 3 inches wide. So when I designed these things, I said, let's just put it right in there, line up the left side in this case, clamp her down, put 2 holes in. So there we go. There's some pocket holes, and if you look in there, you can see the shoulder that the screw will sit against when it goes in. So and I'm just going to put it in the other direction. Clamp it again. Again, no measuring, no muss, no fuss. Drill a couple more. Alright, so now we have 2 in each direction. 2 that way and 2 that way. Now you might say, well Peter, come on, those 2 are in the same place. Well, they're not really. By the time you put 1 screw in, it will be down below, so there'll be room for the other one to go in. There we go. Let's do the other side. Okay, so we're done with this for a minute. Got all our holes done. Now we're going to set it up onto here. So this is the front face, so they go on the back where it's a little crispier. Crispier, nice word, Peter. And then I get all my geometry right. I want the grain to be horizontal, also on the same axis as the front panel. I don't know if I can even show you that in the right place. So in other words, the grain here is horizontal, the grain here is horizontal. There's a couple of reasons for that, but don't worry about that too much. So it's going to sit here, right up in that corner, with just the slightest reveal over here, just so that it's not flush. Just back, 1/16 of an inch or so. So I'm going to do this basically by touch, not exactly by eye. Now, so I'm going to hold the top flush with one finger, decide if that feels good on the side, and drive one of these home. Second one. Let's put the other side on. Awesome, a fantastic little dingus that's gonna go right there and up there and in a few other places too. So that's pretty much ready to cut the hole for the outlet and drill the hole for the 12 volt outlet. Unfortunately, not 12 volt, actually 5.5 volt, whatever the USB thing is. Okay, with any luck, the electrical box will just pop in from the back. And there we go. Nice, 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 nice. Not too elegant, not too bad. Couple of screws there, couple of screws there, and that's done. All right, let's make a whole whack more of these. Done! And that's all 6. Done. Electrical boxes, of course these are residential electrical boxes. Well, on a boat, this is about the best you can do. Plastic ones at least, which is, you know, common these days. And these are designed obviously to sit against a stud in a house. That's why it has the big flange on this side and the nice nailing route. And the little tabs here to set it against the stud, so when the drywall goes on, it's flush, relatively flush with the front of it. All of that is a pain in the butt for me because I'm not going to mount it that way. In fact, there's almost no studs on drywall on a boat. Almost none that I can think of. Anyway, so all I'm going to do basically is take away all the stuff I don't want, which is basically all of this stuff. These tabs, whip that off. This other tab, whip that off. And then these little tabbies here, cut them off. Try to do that without removing your thumb. Good. Alright, so now we have a nice square, shouldered, chamfered, ready to go box that can just slide right in there like that. Then you say, okay, well, how am I going to attach it? Well, I'm not done yet, obviously, am I? So what I do, take a drill with a little drill bit in it, and I drill a couple of holes right there and there. And these particular version of the electrical box already have a couple of holes there and there. So by the time I'm ready to toss this in, back in there, a couple of tiny little stainless steel screws right in there, and that is good to go. Lovely. So here we go. I'm putting the last of these little panels together. And again, what they end up with is an outlet, and that'll be the outlet cover on that side, and one of these little double USB plug jobbies in here. I just have one more to put together here, and then I want to talk to you a little bit about the process of wiring these. Alright, I'm not using the little faceplate jobby, and we can whiz this nut off of here. Now, there's a lot of different grades, qualities, mainly current capacities of these little USB jobs. Cheap ones like this only are, I don't have my glasses on, not very many amps, but suitable for charging an iPhone or even an iPad or something like that. But if you have something where you have a high power demand, and I want to tell you one that I know of, and that's running an iPad to run navigation, GPS software. Somehow an iPad, maybe an Android as well, uses a tremendous amount of power when it's running in GPS mode. And I'm not sure I understand that because it's only receive antenna, but that's not my concern. Anyway, we want to make sure when you install one of these at the helm, put a pretty sizable one there because it's going to take an amazing amount of power to keep that iPad running straight time. Anyway, that's just a little thing I've discovered, but for almost all the other power points on the boat, you can put these relatively cheap ones in because the expensive ones are very expensive. Alright, so and then the box, I think I mentioned to you before, I had to trim the edges of the box to make them fit, and I also drilled extra little holes to make them fit, and in fact I've got them numbered 2 to 2, just to make sure when I put them back together they all fit. Bit of a tight fit, kind of got to squeak them in here. There we go. Good. Okay. Going to run a couple of little wood screws in there to hold that in place, and we'll start wiring it up. Okay. Okay, 110 volt AC wiring. I use 12 gauge for all the AC wiring on the boat. That's a little bit overkill. 14 gauge would do for a 15 amp circuit, but I like to have just one spool of wire, use one set of wire on the boat. Likewise, I use 14 gauge for all the DC. again, because in a boat sometimes you may have wires bundled, there may be other reasons you want a little more current carrying capacity. For the price difference between 12 gauge and 14 gauge, just get 12 gauge and you're all set. Okay, so now in terms of the actual circuit, here I am slicing wire on this beautiful table. I have to be very, very careful. There are some things particular to AC plugs that we have to pay some attention to. And that's that these things are not marine products. They're not necessarily designed for boats, and as far as I can tell, you can't get ones that are dedicated for boats, but someone may correct me. I'm sure if they do exist, they're prohibitively expensive. So to make the connection, these devices are designed to take solid strand wire. Household wiring is a single strand inside the insulation. In fact, in some jurisdictions, you're allowed to just stick it in a hole in the back, and that's considered a safe connection. As a builder, I've never done that. So basically, you make a little hook, you wrap it around the screw, which is already captive in there, and you wind it in and you're done. Well, you cannot do that with stranded wire. Let's have a look, see. Stranded wire, which is the only kind of wire you can use on a boat because it is the only kind of wire that is safe where there's flexibility, where there's chance of vibration and motion. I can bend this wire back and forth about 1,000 times, totally made that up, before there's any loss of strands, whereas you bend back and forth a 12 gauge house wire, single core, and that'll snap in short order. So that's the situation in a boat where you have vibration and there's a possibility that a single strand house wire would break. So don't use any house wire in your boat. But then you get to these and you say, well, how am I connecting to these? You certainly can't be wrapping that stranded stuff around here, because stranded wire is absolutely no good under a screw like that. The strands all splay. If you've ever done it, you know what I mean. So you need a connector. So you need, well, you need a ring connector, which is your standard way to connect to a screw, right? So we'd stick this on here, we do the crimp, we do the heat shrink, etc. It's ready to go on here. The only problem is these screws are captive. They're designed, they're peened over on the inside, so you can't pull them out. Now, I've done it, and others must have done it too, where you actually force this out, effectively stripping a little peening, put it through the ring connector and put it back in, and all's good. Except that as you yank this out, you damage the thread somewhat. And damaging the threads on the tip of the screw isn't the end of the world, but if you damage it in the plate, it's not so good, because that's where you expect it to hold again afterwards. So I really don't like that technique. More on that later. So then you say, okay, use a spade connector. Well, spade connector is awesome. You just slide it right on and tighten it up, no problem. Except that spade connectors are kind of looked poorly on by the marine industry, certainly the ABYC, which is the regulating body that looks after all this stuff. But there's one exception, a hooked spade connector. See how it has little teeth around the backside there, little hooks catching? What that means is by the time I put that under the screw and I tighten it down, there's some mechanical support to keep this from sliding off, not just the friction in the screw. These are not ideal, but accepted. So that is your connector of choice. So by the time you connect this on here, get the wire on there, slide that under there, tighten that down, you have a bulletproof connection, in my opinion. Now, there's one complication when you're daisy chaining, because you can bring power in, you know, hot and neutral on one side of the plug, and if you don't break out the tab, the other side of the plug is live. Well, that's how you daisy chain along to the next plug. Super easy. You have enough connectors on a standard duplex plug to do that, with the exception of the ground. There's only one ground. So you can't daisy chain to another screw off the ground. Well, you might say, okay, no problem. Just because it's grounded through to the standard ground screws in the bottom of the box, just use those. Well, these are gnarly little connectors at the bottom of a semi-galvanized strap that might be making a good contact up here through this screw. I just don't like it. It's up to you though, because the option is not ideal either. Now, I've already said that you mustn't pull these screws out. Well, I found that the exception can be the ground screw, because you can't put two of these beautiful hooked spades under the screw because they stack on top of each other badly. They don't make a good connection. What you need to do here is take two ring connectors and put them back to the back. See, if you stack them like this, they won't stack well. Okay, you'll get bad connection. It'll all bend and it'll help a little bit. But if you stack them back to back, By the time you tighten that up and it bends a little bit, that's a pretty safe connection. So you're making 2 connections on 1 screw, which is legit. The only downside of it is you are yanking this ground screw out, but I find I've never had trouble with these not biting again nicely. So you put the 2 connectors on and you wind it back in, re-engaging the semi-damaged threads. I can't even hold on to this. And if you find that you can run that home and get it good and tight on those 2 connectors, and you're confident that that is as tight as it needs to be, you're set. If not, do the ground first. And then when you get that good and tight, if it strips and it's no good, throw this thing away. It's like 99 cents. Start another one. And make sure that that gets a good contact on the ground connections before you start doing your power connections, and you can be pretty safe. You're getting a pretty good set of connections onto here. Now, I don't know how long these would last, what kind of longevity, how reliable they are in a boat situation. Certainly when I'm putting them on this boat and on mine, they're in pretty dry, safe conditions. I don't think they're going to give me too much trouble. You could put a little daub of silicone grease on there or some other kind of anti-corrosive thing. I don't bother. These things are cheap enough that I almost am tempted to replace them in a few years, because I don't know if you've ever noticed, but I've got nothing to plug in here. The springs inside on the actual plugs, basically the female part of the plug, wears out on any domestic style duplex that I've been able to buy in the last many years. Now, I'm getting a lot of long-winded here, but I replace my plugs as soon as I feel any weakness in the plug. Because if you have a poor connection in there and a high current load, this is going to get hot. And when this gets hot, ugly things happen. So, that's my take on AC wiring. I think you've had enough for today. I'll show you around a little bit of what these look like when they're installed. I've got a few in already. Here's one over here. Still, the wires aren't tagged up and stuff, but that's basically what it looks like. And as I said, there's going to be quite a few. There's one over there, doesn't have a faceplate on it anymore, and they're all the way through the boat, but I don't think it's all that entertaining to watch me pull wires around. Okay, so that's AC wiring in a nutshell. We'll probably go into this in a lot more detail some other time, but that'll do for now. Cheers!